First, I want to say good afternoon to everyone and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We're here to learn more about Footsteps, which is a not-for-profit organization founded to assist individuals and families who are transitioning out or who have transitioned out of ultra-Orthodox communities. For those of us who saw the movie or read the book Unorthodox, you know that those individuals face ostracism and harassment sometimes from their communities. They lack the education, the social skills, the gender identity, the professional skills, the economics to very often to live outside their very sheltered and very controlling communities. And Footsteps was created to provide that assistance. We're going to have 3 speakers this afternoon. I will briefly give you their bios. The first is Steve Eisman, who is a member of our community, and we are delighted to have him as a member of the North Fork Reform Synagogue. He is managing director of Neuberger Berman. Steve's approach to investing was featured in Michael Lewis's book, The Big Short, which was later made into a movie. While you can usually find Steve lecturing to the financial services community across the country, today Steve is here to share with you his passion for Footsteps, where he has served as a board member for nearly a decade. As I indicated, Footsteps supports and affirms individuals and families who are choosing to leave their ultra-Orthodox community in pursuit of self-determination and a new life. Our second speaker is Lani Santo. Lani is CEO of Footsteps. She has driven the organization's growth from a 3-person startup with a $400,000 budget in 2010 to a full service organization with an annual budget of $4 million, 26 staff, and close to 2,000 members, people the organization has been serving. Under her leadership, Footsteps stories have reached the pages of the New York Times, the New Yorker, and the screen of Netflix, which debuted One of Us, an award-winning documentary about 3 courageous Footsteps members. Our third speaker is Mindy Yeager, who was born and raised in Borough Park, which is probably less than 10 minutes from where I was born and raised. Borough Park is in Brooklyn. She is a proud single mother of 3 adult children, a grandmother to the cutest 2 kids in the world. Mindy works full-time as a legal research analyst and dabbles in stand-up comedy, which I find very, very impressive. Mindy joined Footsteps in 2014 as part of the mentor program, hoping to support other members in having a smoother transition out of their ultra-Orthodox communities. Mindy is passionate about giving back to the Footsteps community and supporting the life-changing work Footsteps does every day. I know you're all going to have a lot of questions, so I request that we save questions until the end. And now I give you Steve Eisman. Thank you very much, Steve, for setting this up and organizing it for us.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I just want to point out my wife, Valerie, who's on one of the boxes over here, depending upon where you're sitting, who's also involved with Footsteps as well. I'm going to be very brief about myself. I've been a board member for about 10 years. This is by far my most important charity. I get involved with it. I come from a background of not being religious, but I went to an modern Orthodox Jewish day school in New York called Ramaz, where I got a very good Jewish education. Roughly 2007 and 8, I was in a bookstore, remember those? And I was looking around and I found a book called The Unchosen, which was a book about people who were in the process of leaving or had left the Ultra-Orthodox community. This is a population I knew almost nothing about. I was very moved by the book. There was an entire chapter about Malki Schwartz, who had founded a charity called Footsteps, which was designed to help this community. And a couple of days after I finished reading the book, I looked up the organization on the web. I found Malki, I called her, and I've been involved ever since. What I would just ask you to think about is imagine, you're growing up in Borough Park, in a very ultra-Orthodox community. Your first language is probably Yiddish. Your second language is English. You speak it like you just generally got off the boat. Or you speak it with an accent, or you don't speak it particularly well. Your secular education is extremely weak. And for whatever reason, let's say you wake up at age 16, 17, 18, or even later, you decide, you know what, this is not for me. How do you get out? You have very few skills. Your parents might disown you. We help you. That's really what we're all about. And, when I got started with the organization around 2008, I would say about 75% of the people that we helped were men. We had a real problem reaching out to women, largely because women get married so young, get pregnant so early. It's even more difficult for them to get out than the men. About, I don't know how many years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we started to create a program to help women in the divorce process, which is a brutal process because the community basically attacks anyone who's leaving. And I think partially because of that, the ratio of men and women that we help is roughly 50-50. It's a great organization.
That's a great match.
Wonderful leader by Lonnie Santon. I'm just going to hand it off to her. Lonnie?
Thanks. Actually, we're going to turn it over to Mindy and then I'll wrap up. So go ahead, Mindy.
Hi, thank you very much, Lonnie and Steve, for inviting me to speak today. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and I'm always ready, willing, able, and happy to support the work that Footsteps does. A little bit about me. I grew up in Borough Park. I'm the daughter of 2 Holocaust survivors, one from the Polish Holocaust and one from Hungarian Holocaust. So, those were 2 very different experiences, but my parents came together and, lucky for me, decided to embrace life and family. I'm the youngest of 5, and that meant that everyone in my life had authority over me. I'm 8 years younger than my nearest sibling. So I learned early on that the key to survival was conforming and being and doing what everyone around me expected and needed for me to do. So I became a chameleon. I would make people laugh anytime I could. And I went through life figuring out what was needed from me and how to best accommodate people. I was in an all-girls school called Beis Yaakov of Borough Park. And I was a good student. I was respectful. And I made it through under anybody's radar in that school. And what happens is, being born in the late 60s, being raised in the 70s, as a female in that community, my life was really pretty much carved out for me. There was no decisions I needed to make. Basically, You go to school, you get your Jewish education, you're modest, you're a good girl, and then you find a husband and you get married and have children, and so it continues. Like the pinnacle of a Jewish girl's life is in finding a husband and starting a family. And that means that for frum or religious girls, their lives peak anywhere between age 17 and 21. Anything after that is considered a tragedy. And so when it came time for me to come of age, I was 18 years old and I wasn't a size 2. And this was a very big problem. And there was nobody, no matchmakers, no shadchans, calling and asking for me to go out with anybody. And my parents were very, very nervous for me because once I turned 19, it was already getting dangerous. I was absolutely fine without getting married young, but I understood that there was this concern for my future. And so the first guy who showed up and said, would you? I had only one answer available, and that was yes, of course. And a big part of that was because there is a promise made. There's a quid pro quo in the community that says that if you are a good girl, if you follow the rules and you're modest in your dress and behavior, and you come from a good family, that you're going to be blessed with a husband and a family and a happy life. And so I believed that by saying yes to this person, I would be fulfilling the next level of my life's goals. And that's the promise that is made. But what happens when that promise doesn't come true? My life did not go according to plan. I married someone who struggled with anger and violent outbursts, which only got worse as the children arrived and got older and became harder and harder to control. For a long time, I thought that was my fault, and that if there was a way for me to fix it, I would fix it, because we married for life. There wasn't really a lot of options. But as life got harder and harder to navigate and manage, and it became more and more scary, I realized that after 16 years, it wasn't going to get better, and it was getting worse. And so I finally got an order of protection to really rescue my children at that point, who were in trouble and unsafe. And in response to me getting an order of protection, my then husband sent me a hazmana, which is a summons to the Jewish courts, or the Beit Din. And the hazmana, the summons, was for a get, which is a Jewish divorce. And so his response to me saying, we need to separate, we need to figure this out, he called me for a divorce. And so I, at the time, really felt like the rabbis were going to hear me. They were going to listen, they were going to see how black and white my story was, and these were colors they were very familiar with, and they were going to hear me, and they were going to take care of me. And I thought, even as far as they would use us as an example, because I wasn't running away from religion, I wasn't, going off the path. I just wanted to save my family. And I thought that they would take care of us. So I signed an arbitration agreement with the Jewish courts, which effectively stripped me of my rights as an American citizen and as an equal partner in any marriage. And essentially, the deck was stacked against me from that point on. The experience of my Beit Din divorce was actually what thrust me out of that community. And it went on for over 6 years, during which time I spent over $60,000 paying rabbis to not listen to me and not take any interest in my situation. I got no child support for those 6 years. And it was basically an attempt to put me into a corner so that I would agree to give custody to my husband. And the whole reason I left him was to save my children. And so that was the one thing I couldn't agree to. There are a couple of things that happened during the Beit Din that really started to shake my resolve around who I was and the community I came from. One of them was after 12 or 13 sessions in the Jewish courts, it was finally my turn to speak. And when I started talking about the impact as a religious woman of my husband's affair and my husband's violence, the rabbi who was representing him got so emotional and enraged that he slammed his hand down on the table while I was speaking. And he said, "That's enough." And I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not done speaking." And he said, "Oh, you're done speaking because I'm going to put you in your place." And I said, "You're going to put me where, Rabbi?" And he basically looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'm going to put you in your place because you are an effing B." And he did not soften those terms. He said them out loud, but in the interest of we're at a synagogue event, I'm going to temper the language. And in that moment, I was shocked and appalled. This was a man who had a beard down to his belly button. He had the kippah that covered most of his head. He was a rabbi in the strictest, most classic terms. And this was a man who just treated me worse than my ex ever had. And so I looked at each of the other rabbis in the room, tried to make eye contact. None of them would, and none of them said a word. And so I took my bag and I walked out and I slammed the door behind me. And when I got home, after the hysterical tears and the crying, it was like I had been knocked conscious or broken open. And I understood in that moment that these men were never going to be the architects of my future. They were never going to be the ones who were going to make any decisions about how I lived my life or how my children lived their lives. And it was in that moment that I understood that this was not home for me. This community, I had been conforming, I had been playing the role, I had been doing what I was supposed to do for my whole life. And I was done living in a society that really didn't have my back. And so that was the first moment of knowing that I was out of there as soon as I could. The Beit Din itself took a few more years after that. We went to court to try and get out of Beit Din. Court sent us back to Beit Din. And at the same time, all of this is going on where I'm having to lean on family for financial resources because we're not getting child support. The mortgage isn't being paid. Nobody's making him do anything. The town, the community itself also got word about me that I was not following the rules, that I was not maintaining the status quo. And people who months before were at my Shabbat table, were my friends, were co-committee members of my kids' school, PTA, they were turning their backs on me in the grocery store, crossing the street, when I would see them walking. It was like a complete pariah had been made of me and my kids. And so we sort of went inward as a family, and we created a safe space, a safe haven in our home. So inside of the walls of our home was a safe space, and it was our fortress. And looking back, it's an extraordinary thing that home was our community, and in the end, the community became dangerous for us. So home had to be our literal house of safe refuge. And there was one additional moment where I understood that we weren't home anymore in the community. And it was winter. I had 3 very young children, and the dryer, my clothes dryer, started smoking. It was late evening, but the kids were still awake. And I called the fire department. I called the fire department, and they said, whatever you're wearing, whatever you're doing, get out of the house. Go outside and we'll be there as soon as possible. And so, of course, I grabbed my kids and we ran to our front. We had this like little front landing, and it was winter and we're in pajamas, no coats, we were wearing slippers and we were freezing. And the fire trucks all started descending on the street. And I noticed all of the lights went on in my neighbors, my former friends. And I saw people peering from the shades, and nobody called or came by with a blanket or a sweater or anything. Nobody checked in. You know, my house could have been on fire. We could have literally been, you know, in a dangerous situation, and nobody came. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, God, I get it. This isn't home anymore. And so there was this additional resolve then that we would find our way out of there. And it was after I finally had a settlement that I moved my family from Muncie to Teaneck, New Jersey. And I should mention that the Basin wound up giving me full custody, legal and physical, of my children, which is almost unheard of. But they didn't give me anything else. They gave him my home. They charged me rent for the 6 years that I had been living there while divorcing him. And so in the end, it was an unbelievably draconian decision, but by that time, I was expecting nothing better. We moved to Teaneck. I finished raising my children as a single mom, and that crisis, sort of was over. And when my youngest son left high school, I had another crisis, and that was more of an identity crisis. The warrior in me had to recognize that the war was over and we had won. And now that I was going to be, an empty nested parent, if I'm not a full-time mother, if I'm not fighting this battle to reverse the negativity of my children's early childhoods, who am I? And that is when I started really looking into how can I figure out who I am and give back, because now I didn't have kids to take care of. Who could I take care of? And at the time, I met up with a friend of mine that I had met a while before, Chani Getter. And I was talking with her about this new empty nested status of mine. And she said, I think I have the perfect spot for you. She told me about Footsteps, and she told me about this mentor program that they were starting. And I was thrilled at the suggestion, because throughout the entire divorce process, I had my family's support. My mother passed away shortly after I left my husband, but my father helped with finances. My siblings went to every single Beit Din session with me. I had a support system, such as it was. And I said to myself, what if I hadn't? Where would I have had the money or the wherewithal to fight for as long as I had? I probably would have had to submit or surrender my children, or they wouldn't have given me a choice. And so I understood how, despite how difficult everything had been for me, I was also very, very lucky. And I wanted to make it a little bit easier for other people who might not be so lucky and not have family support. I wanted to be that support. And fortunately for me, Footsteps already existed. And so I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. I just came and joined on to Footsteps and started volunteering. And I have to say, I thought I needed nothing from Footsteps, that I would just be giving. But as is true of any volunteer or charitable work, the energy and the community that I got back, the support that I got back, I didn't even know I needed it. And it became a family of sorts. It became a place where I could be 100% me, with no apologies needed and no explanations needed. I could show up as I am, and nobody had any real questions for me. And so once I started down that road, stand-up comedy was almost inevitable. Comedy had been, really a saving grace for me during my divorce. And I would go to comedy clubs for release. I would laugh until I sweat. And so today I am a college graduate, much in part thanks to Footsteps scholarship opportunities. I was able to go and follow that dream. I'm in my 14th year working for Wolters Kluwer as a research analyst in their sales tax legal department. I raised my kids. They are married. They are all living in Israel. I have 2 grandchildren and 2 grandpuppies. And as I said, every opportunity I have to give back to the Footsteps community or to help with the extraordinary challenges that Footsteps members show up with, I'm always ready to jump in wherever I can. And I think that's enough about me. And I want to thank you all for listening and for inviting me. And I'm going to pass the mic, as they say, to Lonnie, who's going to tell you a little bit more about Footsteps as an organization.
Thank you so much, Mindy, and for sharing, and Stephen and Valerie for inviting us here, and for to North Fork Reformed Synagogue for welcoming us this Shabbat afternoon. I'm sure you all have a lot of questions for Mindy, and we will get to them in just a few minutes. Mindy is just one of 2,000 courageous and resilient individuals that Footsteps has supported since our founding in 2003. There are countless others, many of whom land on currently our virtual doorsteps on a daily basis, and many who are much earlier on in their journeys than Mindy was when she first joined. And they turn to Footsteps with fear of losing everything. They are seeking a listening ear, a safe space, that space of refuge, as Mindy said, where people understand them, won't judge them for having questions, doubts, or a vision of their lives that veers from the expected path. Let me just paint a picture of a few more of the hundreds of people who've reached out to us just this year. Imagine being the oldest of 12, about to be matched for marriage, living in a really small apartment in Williamsburg, knowing this life isn't going to work for you, and not wanting to get married and have kids and implicate them in a system that you're not believing in, and yet you're stopped in your tracks by a global pandemic just as you make your first brave call out to Footsteps. Or a young man who finally started college after Footsteps helped him secure a GED, but then the jobs he depended on disappear and he can't pay his own way anymore, and he comes to the agonizing conclusion that he has to drop out and move back in with his family, who was far from supportive. Those very people who had predicted that if he'd left, he'd fail. And I just want you to juxtapose that to the so many grown children, and I'm sure many of your families, your kids welcome back grown children into their homes this year with open arms, and our members had nowhere to go. Finally, imagine a mother of 6 in Muncie, so desperate to connect with your weekly parent support group at Footsteps, but unable to sneak out to your car on your secret smartphone to Zoom into Footsteps support group because it was buried under 2 feet of snow. I'm asking you to imagine these scenarios, but these are very real people and common scenarios that our members faced just this year. Did you know? You probably didn't know before learning a little bit about this, that Footsteps is the only organization in North America providing comprehensive services to this all too often marginalized and overlooked segment of the Jewish community. Often, our members refer to themselves as immigrants, but they're immigrants into a country in which they are citizens. Whether they're taking their first hesitant steps or reaching out for support once they have dared to leave, Footsteps is there for them. We combine peer support alongside critical professional resources, mental health, educational access, scholarships, job counseling, legal support, and financial support. This past year alone, we allocated $240,000 to 140 people in crisis funds. That's 10 times more people than we did to crisis funding in the prior year. You know, we talk about as Jews being one people, and we are sincerely rooted in values of justice and choice and inclusion and respect for diversity, but we need to remember to include this critical and growing group of brave individuals in our own community, many of whom live a stone throws away from us, even if they seem like they're worlds apart. You might be surprised to know that the ultra-Orthodox community is the fastest growing segment of the Jewish community. In the New York metro area alone, over 600,000 ultra-Orthodox Jews are part of the population. And as that community grows, so does the movement of those leaving it. Footsteps is their chosen family, like Mindy said, a community and a community without fences. We stand by them as they forge their own identities, build their own communities, and lead self-determined lives. Our members, along with dedicated allies, many like you and Steve and Valerie have been some of our biggest cheerleaders, step up and give back, and including people like Mindy, right, who's gone through the experience, and they help together to build that Footsteps extended family. Time and time again, our members tell us that Footsteps is their lifeline. It's our firm belief that no one should have to make the choice between living an authentic life and their family, community, and financial safety net. I hope that you'll agree and get to know us better. Thank you, and we'll move into Q&A. And I'm happy to moderate that.
Thank you very much.
Unless, Susan, you want to moderate. I don't know people's names, so.
Well, I can't see whether you have questions, but
Some people are muted. I see Stevens has his hand raised. Stevens iPad Pro. Go ahead. Yeah.
I have a question. Has any of the Orthodox communities sued Footsteps or taken any other legal steps otherwise to pressure Footsteps to discontinue its assistance?
No, they haven't sued us. In the early days, there was certainly a lot of fear, and like organizationally, as Steve shared, Malky Schwartz founded the organization. She grew up in Crown Heights. I think that many, when talking to folks in the community who are willing to listen, some understand that people need a safety net that's otherwise not there for them. And if this life won't work, then there should be a safety net. Many don't feel that way. And Footsteps is vilified by the community, but not legal recourse, sometimes unpleasant voice messages, but not too much beyond that. I think that sometimes we're seen as like there's a natural attrition rate. That's sometimes how they see it, and people might leave. They don't per se love that we've gotten louder over the years. Did someone else have their Joyce? Yeah.
I was wondering what happens if an ultra-Orthodox woman, such as the one we have been speaking to, decides to skip the rabbinical court and just go to regular courts, go the route of the state.
Mindy, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to?
I can certainly start.
Go ahead. Yeah.
To that. The risk that you run is being shunned, which in the end happened to me anyway. Ultimately, when you go the court route, you start out as the enemy of the community. I didn't even know what I didn't know about that. If you go to court instead of going to the Jewish court, the community will rally behind the other spouse, regardless of the reason for the divorce or what's going on. They will hire high-end attorneys to go to represent the other spouse, and they will do everything in their power to support the other spouse, especially if there are children involved, and especially if religion is different between the two spouses. And so it's not an easier path at all once you are going, to divorce.
I think I'll just add that what Footsteps works to do is to really educate people before they start the process. So it used to be that people didn't know what they were signing when they were signing in Based-In, and that's held up by secular courts as binding arbitration. And so as we've started our legal and family justice program, And that involves partnering with a lot of different agencies and law firms. We're not providing legal services directly, but providing counseling and education. And one of the things we're educating people about is like, before you sign anything, talk to lawyers, know what you're signing, because often it's assumed that like you don't need representation and based in. That's not like women just like sign things and they don't know what they're signing. And so we're trying to educate people so that they know more what they're signing earlier on. And then they decide which route to start and at what point if they want to get the get or not. And that's a decision that people are making. Margot, you have a question?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you, Mindy. I mean, this is, thank you for coming and sharing your story. It's such a heartbreaking story, and it's also so wonderful because it ended well. So, it's just both inspiring and heartbreaking and inspiring. And I'm sure that, everybody has questions about it. I have like a million questions here, but I want to sort of start from the beginning because there's a lot of things that you told us that I like clueless. I have no idea about, but one of the things that truly startled me is you said that your parents were Holocaust survivors. And I had no idea that Holocaust survivors, this is my ignorance, but that Holocaust survivors were joining Ultra-Orthodox communities when they came to the United States after the Holocaust. And I was just wondering how common is it, how prevalent is it in the communities, and were these people Ultra-Orthodox before the war, or they just came in and joined the Ultra-Orthodox communities because it felt like home after the atrocities of the war? If you could address that, or anybody could address that, you, Lani, or you, Mindy.
Sure. First of all, thank you for that question. My father was a quintessential Hasidic man in Poland. Mm-hmm. He was a child when his family was, sent to Siberian work camps. But his father was a rabbi, was a shochet, which means he ran the slaughterhouses. So you had to be a particularly pious Jew to get that honor. So my father's entire family, and probably dating back many generations in Poland, were Hasidic Jews. And my mother's family similarly. While it was a very different Hasidic community back then, it didn't look anything really like it looks today, even though they're holding what they call ancient traditions. My mother's family was also, from the Satmar sect of Hungarian Jewry. And so when they came here, it was really about not so much joining a religious community, but trying to heal and trying to come together as a community to continue traditional Jewish practices that they had grown up with.
And I'll just add to that, Mindy, thanks for sharing. The Hasidic community existed before the Holocaust, as Mindy just shared, and it's grown immensely and really shifted. And Ultra-Orthodoxy is a broad umbrella, or the Haredi world is a broad umbrella of which the Hasidic community is part of. All of Ultra-Orthodoxy has grown a lot since the Holocaust, and a lot of the pressures that are put on conforming have to do with continuing the traditions, because we can't lose another soul. And in fact, a lot of the battles that play out in custody that people have been asking about are about not losing okay, we're going to lose one soul, but let's make sure that we don't lose those 5, 6, 7 kids, because we can't lose any more souls because we've lost so many in the Holocaust. So it really is it's a very big part of day-to-day life and of the messaging that continues in the Ultra-Orthodox community. And so some people left completely, right, after the Holocaust and didn't believe in God, and others got more fervent. As we see in society, the clash like of right secularism and fundamentalism is, I think, part of that push and pull. Anyway, that's getting a little heady, but what's driving the growth of the Hasidic Orthodox community? Birth rate, yes. I mean, right? Largely birth rate. The average size of Hasidic families is 8, 12 kids. There are plenty with 17, 19. So it's largely birth rate. And then it's also just, as modernity is creeping in, there are some people who are becoming like a little more open, like say someone could go to college, a woman could go to college, it's okay because they have to like earn a living in some parts of the ultra-Orthodox community, but others are really digging in their heels and becoming much more insular. So so I would say sheer birth rate is driving it. Other questions? Ellen, yeah. You have to unmute yourself. Sorry, I muted you. Ellen, there you go.
Okay, there I go.
Yeah.
I know it says Ellen, but my name is Kay and it doesn't.
Oh, hi.
It's not your fault, it's technology.
Okay.
I just wanted to know, other than talks like this, how do you go about letting the community know that you're available to help them?
Yeah, I mean, these talks are more, it's awareness raising, right? Like we're not, this is to the broader Jewish and community. We do talks like this, but in terms of how people know, it's a lot of it is like, the way that Mindy found out, except that she found out when she was out. So people find out about Footsteps who are looking for services largely through word of mouth. There's a very big online presence now when people are first leaving and maybe they call it in the closet about their religious identity. And so they will create a fake name on Facebook and join secret groups. And then they hear about Footsteps there, or they know about us because we're at this point persona non grata in the community. And so they might hear, oh, can you believe so-and-so, went to Footsteps over a Shabbos table. Like right now that could be happening. People are not really socially distancing in the communities right now. So then people find out because their ears perk up and they're like, oh, and they're hearing from negative publicity that we get, but they're secretly doubting.
Thank you very much.
They hear that.
Thank you.
Yeah. There was a question about how to help, which I was going to say for the last question. I just wanted to tell people I did see that in the chat. Are there other questions for Mindy or Henry? Go ahead. Yeah. You have to unmute yourself also, Henry.
Okay, I'm on you. There must be couples of loving, caring parents, one of whom wishes to leave the community and the other not. Have you guys been able to arrange any kind of quid pro quo in such situations?
Mindy, do you want to talk about peers that you know of who've been in situations like that, or you want me to speak to this one?
I mean, I can start and you can
Yeah.
fill in any gaps that I don't get to. So there is this miraculous thing that happens where a couple actually finds, tremendous connection with each other, and they have love and respect and partnership, even in that world where it's really a toss-up because we don't really know our spouses when we marry. And I have a very dear friend who is a Footsteps member, who is not religious and whose wife is religious, and their mutual respect and their connection in their marriage and their devotion to their children has them working it out, has them figuring it out where, they're each making sacrifices for the other in order to make it work. And to me, they're like the unicorns of the Footsteps community because I'm constantly in awe of what they are able to do in the interest of keeping their family together. And I know that Footsteps is a big support of their.
Yeah. I mean, and I would say that piece is so, so rare. And I think that one of the things that unfortunately happens, even when say couples want to try to work it out, is that the families intervene. And Mindy mentioned that her family was supportive of her. All too often, especially these days, people's parents turn on them. Literally, we have grandparents testifying against their children that they feel who are leaving the community, saying that they will be bad parents in family court, and wanting to make sure that their grandkids stay in the community. And so they insist. Sometimes it's the parents that insist that the couple breaks up because they don't want bad influences to come. And often if a couple is working it out, they'll shift. They won't be as religious because they're trying to compromise in their life. So they might move out of, deep Curious Joel to a neighboring area like New City, if you know Rockland County. That's just an example. So we try. A lot of what we do for people is that whether they're married or they're young, our social workers really try to slow the process down for people, because often people have been thinking about this for so many years, and so much has built up, and there's been such intense agony in terms of mental distress and emotional distress that they reach out to Footsteps after they basically feel like they've tried everything else to make it work, and then they don't. And when they reach out to us, they might be like, okay, I'm ready to go. And we're like, slow down, right? Think about all the consequences of your actions and in various different cases. So I would just say that's the role that we tend to play in trying to mitigate and help people maintain family connections as they're forging forward. But we really need to make sure that people are in safe emotional spaces to do that, and physical spaces. Susan, yeah.
I just to kind of continue what you're talking about, if you have a parent who's really been thinking a long time about transitioning out of a community, but that parent has a bunch of kids who are still in yeshiva, you've got a parent in one place and children maybe in a different place. And I was wondering what kind of services are available to keep at least, let's say the mother and the children together on the same page, because the mother may not be in the same place as the kids.
Yeah, I mean, Mindy, do you want to take this or do you want me to?
I mean, it's a very difficult scenario, and very often that's where the break in the relationship happens, because the kids are still sort of in this cocooned insular environment, and they're learning that the things that their parent has done are wrong or bad or somehow dangerous, and there becomes a really big like a crack in the relationship, in the connection between children and parents. And to me, that's the most tragic mistake that the community keeps making, because in the end, if the religion is solid, if the teachings are solid, having a parent who's different really shouldn't be so scary. And this is something that just keeps coming up. There are so many people who have lost access to the children, or whose children have been who have demonized them, because they're not religious anymore. And I think that's the biggest devastation. I can't even imagine what that would be like, but I have friends who are living that, and it's very difficult.
I would like to follow up on this if I could. And this is maybe too broad a question, but Mindy, your driver to try to leave the community was an abusive husband, right? But I have a sort of, and maybe that's unfair, but I have a sort of a general feeling that men in that community are abusive towards women, or at least do not, maybe not to the extent that your experience, but generally have oppressed women in. Why is that? What is it? Is it religious, or is it social, or why are women being oppressed? Or maybe that's not true, and you just tell me, no, that's actually not true, not any more than in a mainstream community. But I have a feeling that women are oppressed in that community.
Well, first I want to say that what drove me out of the community was not my abusive husband, it was my abusive divorce. My abusive husband drove me out of my marriage. I had no designs on the community when I started my divorce. The community threw me down the stairs, figuratively. I would say that, so as goes the rest of society, so goes the religious community. They may be like a couple of generations behind, but we know that even in secular society, women are not exactly equal to men just yet. So I think that, if you try to imagine the world for women in the 18th century, where we're kind of like chattel, we don't really have a vote, we don't count, we can't get credit cards, all of those things. That's kind of where the Hasidic community, the ultra-Orthodox communities really are. And that's not true for every woman, and it's not true for every couple. I can tell you that lots of people are having an excellent life experience living an ultra-Orthodox life. People are happy there. I don't say that the community should be abolished. I just say that not everyone can fit in the narrow path that's being laid out for people. So are women oppressed? Sure. Are the men oppressed? Sure. They're literally given no way to take care of themselves or their families outside of what the community decides is the right move for them. They're not given the language, they're not given education, they're not given vocational skills. There's plenty of oppression to go around, is what I'm really saying. Lonnie, is there anything else you wanna add to that?
No, I think that you've said that piece well. We have a couple of last questions that are in the chat, so I want to make sure to tend to those. There are a lot. I would just say people are asking about faith and relationship to God, and what Footsteps is at its core is a peer support space with one-to-one services and community. And so people process that together, and we really meet people where they're at. So if someone says, I want to seek out a spiritual counselor, we'll find that for them. Usually that's not what their first, it's like really a basic needs threshold when people are coming to Footsteps, and they're in a place of like wanting to leave it all behind often at first and then work to integrate it. That's not like everyone's story, but that is often a story that we see. And so people find different spiritual accesses along the way. So that's the short answer to that. And I'm just keeping my eye on the time because we have 2 minutes. Someone asked me how I came to Footsteps. I grew up modern Orthodox in an increasingly Black Hat Ultra-Orthodox community, which is the other part of the Ultra-Orthodox community that's non-Hasidic. And my parents had become religious, and they didn't really know what community they were landing in. My dad loved it. It didn't really work for my mom so much. And, I can't, I, for a lot of different reasons, felt like an outsider always in that space. And then my mom, after my parents separated, my mom came out as gay when I was 12 or 13. And the experience that I had of having to hide who I was really, and not share, I didn't tell anyone for 5 years. And that was in modern Orthodoxy back in the 90s. And I really identify with the issues of conformity and the shame around being different. And the truth of the matter is everyone is different. And Orthodox communities try too much put emphasis on from the showmanship of pretending everyone's the same. And that's why people who are different, who seek individual, courses in their own lives end up having such a hard time. So I really identify with it from a personal space and also just from a professionally, the right to your children, the right to education, the right to earn a living. I've been involved in human rights and social justice work for my career, and this was a very, beautiful alignment of all of the personal and the professional. The last question, which was actually the first question in the chat, was how people could get involved besides giving money. And I would just say, work to educate yourself. So if you've watched a movie, read a memoir. If you want to know which memoir is the best or which should be next, maybe I would recommend All Who Go Do Not Return by Shulam Dean. If you haven't watched one of us, or if you have, you could have someone in your family help you do a Netflix watch party, and you could have a little Zoom room with friends and watch it and talk about things. You are welcome. You should sign up for Footsteps mailing list. Our website is footstepsorg.org. There's an extra ORG there, and we can clue you into upcoming events. There are webinars. I would just say, people don't really know about this issue, and people often think that the ultra-Orthodox community is other and not their problem. And so know that this is our family. There's a growing group of people who are seeking to build lives outside of that community. And if we're not there for them, who will be? So get proximate to the work, learn about it, share it with others, and then yes, of course, donating is helpful to the organization. So I don't know, Steve, if you want to add anything as a final reflection, but
no, I just want to thank everybody for listening in. And like I said, it's my biggest commitment to charity by far. I think this is really about freedom of choice and giving people the ability to live the lives that they want to live. And I think the more you learn about Footsteps, the more you'll be shocked at some of the stories, because some of them are quite frankly heartbreaking. And thank you all for joining us.
Well, we thank you, Valerie. Nice to see you, Steve, Lonnie, Mindy. This has been inspiring, educational, heartbreaking, informative, all at the same time. We will go to the website, do our homework and reading. And we thank you so much for sharing your information and your knowledge and your experiences with us this afternoon.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for taking your time.
Thank you.
For having us.
Thanks, everyone. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, and you are welcome to stay in
Shabbat shalom.
Havdalah if you wish.
Thanks. I have kids I need to get to, but I appreciate it. Take care.
Shabbat shalom.
Nice to
Shabbat
meet
shalom.
everybody.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Mindy.
You're welcome. Thank you.